And I'm going to go into details of what that is. Let me welcome Manisha Priyam, political analyst, for joining me today, well-known consumer activist and voice, Dr. Bejon Mishra. And we have Anjali Bhardwaj, member of the NCPRI. My first question is to Lord Meghnad Desai tonight, who's joining me once again. Lord Desai, I just want to also clarify for our viewers that the Planning Commission is saying the 32 rupee definition stays. But the 32 rupee definition does not apply insofar as beneficiaries of various government schemes.
That's right.
So the Planning Commission is accepting that it will rely on socio-economic and, if I understand, caste economic census, which is ongoing, to decide the beneficiaries of all these large schemes. So is this, in your view, a strategic retreat, a good clarification, a historic moment? How would you define it?
I think it's a good clarification because the poverty level in India has been measured for 40 years now, as Montek says, since 73-74, at which time, if I recall correctly, it was 15 rupees a week per person. Well, you can imagine how low that was. Now, I think one thing we need is to every 5 years to check whether the proportion who are poor are going down using the same measure, which is the calorie measure. What will give you 2,200 calories or whatever it is, what basket of food will give you that, and then you add a little bit for clothing, etc. That's an old method of measuring poverty. What happened recently, like Tendulkar definition, will say, well, that is not enough, that calories, let's add a few more bits, and then Tendulkar gets a higher level of poverty. $1 a day will give you even a higher echelon for poverty, and the higher you go, the more proportion of people are below that level. That is obvious. Now, I think what has happened in the last 10 years is that the poverty line was never meant to define who receives benefits, because nobody receives very much benefits. But everybody is so awash with cash, states and the central government, that they want to help anybody they can. As far as the politician is concerned, anybody he votes deserves benefits. So they will go out and give it to everybody, regardless of caste, socioeconomic status. So this confusion has now been clarified. That measuring poverty level is a good exercise to check, are we progressing, but it has no operational significance whatsoever.
No, but then...
And the operational significance, politicians will invent new criteria as they go along. The nearer the election, the more generous they'll become. I mean, it's part of it's a waste of money, but that's another story.
But I don't understand this. Anjali, can you explain, in your view, what is the purpose of having submitted that a very controversial affidavit with such abysmal poverty definition figures if the Planning Commission had totally now detached itself from the affidavit? If it is not to be implemented, then what is it for? Some statistical academic exercise?
Yeah. Well, that's what we heard today, Ardab, that it is a statistical academic exercise from what it's, from the news, the press conference today. The 32 rupees poverty line and the 26 rupee poverty line was absolutely absurd and unfortunate. We already discussed this in the context of increasing prices. It's a starvation line. It's not really a poverty line. And in fact, when one talks about poverty lines, it's important to understand that poverty lines are not really about even economic indicators. We're talking about a society deciding what is the minimum basic standard of living, where is it that people can actually live a life of dignity, and that's where we need to fix the poverty line. And today, the delinking of the poverty line from providing basic services has been a very, very important welcome step. And it was extremely important that it be done because there are a lot of schemes in the country, social security schemes like housing, public distribution system under which the poor are getting subsidized food grain, pensions, old age, widow pensions, handicapped pensions, which are all linked to the poverty line. Now, if we are going to restrict people getting benefits to only those who are either earning or consuming less than 32 rupees per day in an urban area, then that would leave out a vast number of people who are actually extremely deserving and ought to be included in any realistic social security scheme of the government.
Question is, that, planning commission, some people at the planning commission said, Manisha Priyam, what is the hue and cry about? That's the kind of sense they gave. Then what is the hue and cry about? There is no link between this 32 rupee thing and poverty alleviation schemes. The media is a little uninformed, unresearched on the subject. Is that the right impression to have given, in your view? Or do you have view today what happened as a strategic retreat? Manisha.
There was no strategic retreat. At no point of time, what you had today, 32 rupees or 26 rupees was not the definition. The definition was the calorific intake. It was the turning of this calorific intake into rupee value that was a controversy, and that does seem like an inadequate amount if one is to see that. But at all points of time, the benefits were given to people on the basis of a BPL survey, and that BPL survey was never done by the Planning Commission. It was done by the Ministry of Rural Development. Even in this case, what you have had is really a joint clarification both from the Planning Commission and a kind of consolation from the Minister for Rural Development, who is really loved by people whose heart lie in the issue of poverty alleviation in this country. That what we are going to do is not go around measuring who has rupees 32 a day in his pocket or not, but really look at who is entitled for those transfers, and for those entitlements, this country is going to have once again a new criteria, which is the criteria of vulnerability. So the real test is in how successful the new survey is going to be. It's not about the 32 or 26. The 32, if it could become a 42, would be good. But the 32 is not the basis for the transfer. The basis for the transfer is in the survey, which is going to be conducted by the Ministry of Rural Development.
As a consumer activist, are you satisfied, Bijon Mishra?
Well, not at all. In fact, Arnab, what we have to understand is that these calculations, when they do, are they taking into consideration the real basic facts which are existing on the ground? So what one needs to understand is that whichever agency, whether it's rural development, whether it's the Planning Commission, are they making the methodology for calculation a very transparent kind of a process by bringing in understandings of all the stakeholders who actually should be able to be consulted, and then a figure which is owned and consensusly agreed by all should be a figure which should be brought about. And unfortunately, some people, they always feel that they're always right, and they never dare to seek information from consumer organizations or people who are really understanding what is happening on the ground level. So for us as a consumer organization, representative, we always feel that any consumer who is unable to access quality health care, is unable to get a 2 square meal which is nutritious with a minimum caloric value, who are unable to get clothing, who are unable to access in terms of the minimum fuel, are all within that poverty line. And what I want to share with you all today is that all the countries within the UN agreed that by 2015, under the Millennium Development Goal, the goal number 1, they would reduce the poverty level, that is people below $1 a day, by half, and people who are victims of hunger by half. So I think this whole exercise is being done intentionally to showcase to the global world that India has halved the poverty line, and we are doing a great job. We don't need to consult anybody. We can just give a figure.
My question is
go about telling the world that we have halved it.
My question is this. One minute. My question is this. If the reality is bitter, why do we not accept the reality? According to this whole multi-dimensional poverty index, or MPI, I am told, it estimated Indian poverty at an astounding 55% of the population in 2005, in comparison with the 29% as per official estimates. This is higher than the World Bank estimates, which were about 42%. So my question to Lord Desai, is, a very eminent economist, is: are we fudging our poverty figures somewhere?
No, nobody is fudging poverty figure. As I was saying before, if you only take the calorie required, which is the old way of calculating poverty, then calculate a food basket, and normally what they say, well, since the poor spend about half of their income on food, let's calculate the cost of food and double it, and that's the poverty level. Now, a lot of research by very good people across the world has been done